The year is 2084. 150 million kilometers from the fragile blue marble of Earth, a silent sentinel drifts through the screaming radiance of the inner solar system. This is the Atlas probe, a masterpiece of 21st century engineering, a solitary ghost of titanium and gold foil destined for a realm where no biological eye could ever hope to gaze. It is a lonely pioneer, a mechanical witness sent to study the very heart of our existence. To the ancients, the sun was a deity, a chariot of fire or a golden eye watching over the affairs of men. But to the cold, calculating sensors of the Atlas probe, the sun is something far more clinical and perhaps far more terrifying. It is a colossus, a gargantuan subroutine of the cosmos, an inexorable clockwork engine that has spent 4,600,000,000 years fusing hydrogen into helium with a rigid and predictable cadence. Within this blinding abyss of plasma, the mechanism of the universe functions with a terrifying precision. For eons, the sun has served as the ultimate guarantor of order, a primordial furnace that transforms matter into light through the elegant mathematics of nuclear physics. Every second, 600 million tons of hydrogen are converted into helium, releasing a torrent of energy that sustains every breath taken on the surface of our distant home. It is a symphony of destruction and creation, a rhythmic pulse that has defined the epoch of humanity. But as the Atlas probe enters the searing outskirts of the solar corona, it begins to witness an unravelling. It moves through a sea of fire where temperatures soar to 1 million degrees Celsius, a region where the laws of thermodynamics seem to dance on the edge of a knife. The probe was designed to map the magnetic filaments of the sun, to listen to the song of the solar wind as it escapes into the void. It was built to be a sentinel of science, a quiet observer of the star that birthed us. Yet, in the late hours of a Tuesday in October, the Atlas probe detects a catastrophe of logic. Deep within the churning convection zones, beneath the roiling surface of the photosphere, the probe's instruments pick up a signal that should not exist. It is a glitch in the heart of the star. In the rigid predictability of the solar engine, a flicker occurs, a momentary pause in the fusion process that defies every model ever conceived by the minds of Earth. For 3 milliseconds, a pocket of the sun simply ceases to obey the laws of physics. It is a silent scream in the dark, a violation of the cosmic tapestry that suggests the universe is not the solid, eternal machine we believed it to be. The Atlas probe, drifting alone in the solar wind, records this anomaly with a cold and unblinking eye. It does not feel fear. It does not wonder at the implications of what it has seen. It merely processes the data, a stream of binary information that describes an impossible void opening within the solar core. This is the moment the narrative of human history shifts. We have always looked at the stars as the ultimate constants, the fixed points in an ever-changing existence. We believed that the sun would continue its slow decay over the next 5 billion years until it eventually swells into a red giant and devours the inner planets in a final, fiery embrace. But the glitch suggests a different reality. It suggests that the sun is not a permanent fixture of the cosmos, but a subroutine in a much larger, much more mysterious mechanism, and that subroutine is failing. As the probe descends deeper into the corona, the radiation begins to gnaw at its shielded hull. The heat is an ocean of violence, a chaotic sea of charged particles that threatens to unravel the very atoms of the machine. Yet, the Atlas continues its mission, a lonely probe standing at the precipice of oblivion. It watches as the magnetic loops, vast enough to swallow 50 Earths, twist and snap with the force of 1 billion atomic bombs. It witnesses the birth of a solar flare, a majestic plume of plasma that reaches out like a burning hand into the abyss. But beneath this grandeur, the glitch persists. The data coming from the deep interior indicates that the fundamental constants of the universe are fluctuating. Gravity, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, the pillars upon which all of reality is built, are shivering. The probe is a remnant of a civilization that thought it had mastered the secrets of the atom. We sent it out with the arrogance of a species that believed it could catalogue the cosmos and understand its every gear. But as the Atlas probe drifts further into the solar furnace, it becomes a witness to our own ignorance. The sun is not merely a ball of gas, it is a sentinel of a deeper truth, a truth that we are only beginning to grasp. The universe is a vast and silent mechanism, and we are but a fleeting spark within its gears. The glitch in the corona is a reminder of our fragility, a sign that the tapestry of time and space can be torn as easily as a thread of silk. The mission of the Atlas probe was intended to last for 10 years, but in the face of this anomaly, time becomes irrelevant. The probe has become a witness to the inexorable march of entropy, an observer of the slow decay that awaits all things. It sees the sun not as a source of life, but as a ticking clock, a countdown toward a silent end. The probe's sensors are overwhelmed by the majesty and the terror of the solar fire, and yet it continues to transmit, its voice a lonely whisper against the roar of the star. It tells a story of a universe that is both beautiful and ruthless, a cosmos where order and chaos are locked in a permanent, agonizing dance. As the 21st century gave way to the 22nd, humanity dreamed of reaching the stars. We built probes like Atlas to be our eyes in the dark, to light the way toward a future among the galaxies. But what the probe has found in the solar corona is a warning. It is a reminder that the void is not empty, and the silence of the cosmos is not the silence of peace, but the silence of a machine that is running out of time. The incident at the corona is not just a scientific curiosity, it is an existential pivot. It forces us to look up at the sky and wonder if the light we see is a reflection of reality or a dying ember of a subroutine that is about to be deleted. The Atlas probe is now a ghost. Its orbit is decaying, and soon it will be devoured by the very star it came to study. It will become a part of the sun, its titanium bones melting into the plasma, its memory banks erased by the fury of the fusion engine. But for now it remains our silent sentinel, the lonely probe that saw the lie written in the heart of the sun. It has witnessed the beginning of the end, the first crack in the foundation of the world, and as it drifts toward its inevitable destruction, it leaves behind a legacy of melancholic optimism. We may be small, we may be fleeting, but for a brief moment in the vast eons of time we were here. We built a machine, we sent it into the fire, and we dared to look into the abyss. The universe may be a ruthless machine, and our sun may be a failing subroutine, but the fact that we can witness it, the fact that we can understand even a fraction of its terrible glory, is the ultimate triumph of the human spirit. The Atlas probe will soon be gone, lost in the white-hot oblivion of the solar corona, but its data remains, a testament to our desire to know the unknowable, even as the stars themselves begin to unravel. For eons, the human gaze was fixed upon the heavens with a mixture of terror and adoration. To the ancients, the sun was the ultimate sentinel, a divine heart beating in the chest of the sky, providing the rhythm for all biological life. It was a chariot of gold, a vengeful god, or a nurturing mother, but it was always perceived as something transcending the mundane. However, as the era of myth gave way to the epoch of the machine, our understanding shifted. We began to view the sun not as a deity, but as a colossal subroutine within a grand cosmic architecture. It became a predictable engine, a furnace where hydrogen atoms are crushed into helium with a rigid, inexorable regularity. We believed we had mapped the soul of our star, reducing its majesty to a series of equations and gravitational constants. We saw it as a clockwork mechanism, a reliable source of energy that would sustain our species for billions of years. But in the late 21st century, this certainty was shattered by a single lonely observer. The 3i Atlas probe, a marvel of late-century engineering, was dispatched to the very edge of the solar corona. This silent sentinel was designed to be the eyes of humanity within the fire, a vessel of titanium and silicon intended to study the intricacies of the solar wind. As it drifted through the void, the probe was a testament to our desire to master the abyss, a tiny spark of consciousness sent to interrogate the primordial furnace. For months, the data it transmitted back to the silent stations on Earth and the lunar colonies was exactly what the scientists expected. The sun was behaving like the ruthless machine we believed it to be, a predictable sequence of fusion and magnetic flux. Then, as the probe entered its 4th year of operation, it detected the glitch. Deep within the heart of the corona, where the temperature rises to millions of degrees, the Atlas probe recorded a deviation that should not have existed. In the rigid predictability of the solar engine, there was a flicker, a subtle unravelling of the laws we thought were absolute. It was as if the subroutine of the sun had encountered an error in its code. The magnetic fields, which should have been governed by the simple mechanics of plasma physics, began to form patterns that defied our understanding of entropy. The probe witnessed a lie written in the heart of the star. It was a moment of profound existential dread. For if the sun, the very foundation of our existence, was not the stable machine we believed it to be, then the entire tapestry of our reality was suspect. The Atlas probe, drifting alone in the white-hot oblivion of the solar atmosphere, became a witness to a catastrophe of perception. It saw that the sun was not merely a ball of gas, but a fragment of a much larger and perhaps more terrifying mechanism. The glitch was not a random fluctuation, but a sign that the solar engine was failing, or perhaps that it had never been the engine we imagined. The probe's sensors, designed to measure the heat of fusion, instead recorded the echoes of something ancient and silent, a remnant of a primordial architecture that preceded the birth of the light. As the probe moved deeper into the solar furnace, the lonely machine began to record the decay of its own systems, even as it documented the decay of the solar subroutine. The titanium skin of the Atlas probe began to melt, its memory banks burning with the intensity of the information it was receiving. It was a sentinel at the gates of the end, a witness to the slow unravelling of the cosmos. The data it sent back was a symphony of chaos, a beautiful and terrifying record of a universe that was no longer functioning according to the rules of the 19th or 20th centuries. We had built our civilization on the belief that the sun was a constant, a reliable gear in the clockwork of the heavens, but the Atlas probe showed us that the gear was slipping. In the face of this revelation, the pride of the 21st century began to wither. We realized that our probes, our telescopes, and our mathematics were merely tools for observing a facade. The sun was a mask, a subroutine designed to provide the illusion of stability, while the underlying mechanism of the universe drifted toward an unknown destination. The lonely probe, in its final hours, captured the image of a solar flare that did not follow the curvature of the magnetic field, but instead seemed to tear a hole in the very fabric of the corona. It was a glimpse into the void, a reminder that the abyss is never far away, even in the heart of the brightest star. The Atlas probe is a ghost now, its mission a haunting memory in the archives of a species that is only beginning to understand its own insignificance. It was the first of our kind to see the truth, to witness the glitch in the divine engine. It told us that the universe is not a home, but a vast and silent mechanism that is indifferent to our survival. The sun, which we once worshipped as a god and later studied as a machine, is revealed as something much more complex and much more fragile. It is a flickering ember in a darkening room, a subroutine that is slowly being deleted by the inexorable march of time. This realization is the pivot upon which our future turns. We can no longer look at the sky with the simple wonder of our ancestors, nor with the cold confidence of our scientists. We must look at the stars and see them for what they are, temporary structures in a landscape of eternal decay. The Atlas probe, through its lonely sacrifice, has given us a gift of melancholic optimism. We know now that the world is not what it seems, and though this knowledge brings the terror of the unknown, it also brings the freedom of the witness. We are the ones who saw the glitch. We are the ones who dared to send a machine into the fire to find the truth, even if that truth is a testament to our own eventual oblivion. As the eons pass and the stars themselves begin to fade, the memory of the Atlas probe will remain a tiny, flickering light in the darkness of our history. It was the sentinel that stood at the edge of the void and did not blink. It was the probe that looked into the heart of the sun and saw the end of the world, and in doing so, it became a part of the very tapestry it sought to understand. The universe may be a ruthless machine, and our sun may be a failing subroutine, but for a brief moment in the late 21st century, we reached out and touched the mechanism. We found the lie, and in that discovery, we found a deeper, more terrible beauty than we ever could have imagined. The silence of the cosmos is no longer empty. It is filled with the data of 1,000 dying probes, each one a testament to the human spirit's refusal to go quietly into the night. We are the witnesses of the unravelling, the observers of the grand decay, and in that role, we find our ultimate purpose. The sun will eventually devour the Atlas probe, and one day it will devour the Earth, but it can never erase the fact that we were here and that we saw the truth written in the fire. For generations, the standard solar model stood as the ultimate testament to human reason. It was our mathematical cathedral, a structure of logic that explained the light of our world with the cold precision of a ledger. We spoke of hydrostatic equilibrium, of the elegant balance between the inward crush of gravity and the outward pressure of nuclear fire. In our hubris, we believed we had catalogued every photon, every neutrino, every whisper of the stellar wind. We saw the sun as a primordial clockwork engine, an inexorable machine that had burned for 4,600,000,000 years and would continue to do so until the long shadows of the cosmic evening finally arrived. To us, the sun was the one constant in an ever-shifting abyss, a reliable sentinel of warmth in the freezing void of the solar system. But the late 21st century brought an end to this comforting certainty. It began with the Atlas probe, a solitary messenger forged from tungsten and hope, launched during the twilight of the second millennium's final century. This silent sentinel was designed to skim the very edge of the solar corona, to taste the fire and report back the secrets of the magnetic field. As it drifted into the searing brilliance of the outer atmosphere, the probe was alone, a tiny speck of terrestrial consciousness lost in a sea of blinding radiation. It was here, in the silent heart of the inferno, that the Atlas probe witnessed the impossible. It did not find the steady, predictable fusion we had mapped in our textbooks. Instead, it found a glitch. To understand the magnitude of this discovery, one must look at the sun through the eyes of the probe. Imagine the sun not as a ball of gas, but as a colossal subroutine within a reality we do not yet comprehend. In the core of the star, hydrogen nuclei are crushed together with such ferocity that they overcome their mutual repulsion, fusing into helium and releasing a burst of energy. This process is the fundamental rhythm of the cosmos, a symphony played on the strings of the strong nuclear force. We had always assumed this symphony followed a score written in the laws of physics. However, as the Atlas probe descended through the transition region and into the corona, the data it streamed back to the silent receivers on Earth began to unravel our understanding. The probe detected a series of thermal fluctuations that defied the laws of thermodynamics. In certain sectors of the solar atmosphere, the temperature would drop to absolute zero for a fraction of a millisecond, before surging back to 2 million degrees. It was as if the fabric of the sun was flickering, a frame rate dropping in a poorly rendered simulation. The magnetic loops, those vast arches of plasma that rise thousands of kilometers above the surface, did not twist and snap as they should. They moved with a rigid, premeditated precision, snapping into place like the gears of a great brass machine. The Atlas probe recorded a solar flare that did not erupt. It phased into existence, appearing as a geometric fracture in the light, a jagged tear that revealed not more fire, but a profound and terrifying void. This was the revelation that the standard solar model was not a description of nature, but a description of a mask. The sun we had worshipped and studied was a subroutine, a carefully maintained illusion designed to provide the energy necessary for life, while hiding the true mechanism of the universe. The probe, in its final moments of operation before the heat finally devoured its circuits, captured a signature of neutrinos that were not the result of fusion. They were an error code, a stream of information that suggested the Sun was not generating power, but drawing it from a source outside our three-dimensional tapestry. The Sun was not an engine, it was a terminal, a glowing interface through which the cosmos was being fed. As the Atlas probe was consumed by the very star it sought to understand, it left behind a legacy of existential dread. We are the inhabitants of a world warmed by a lie. The Sun is a flickering ember in a darkening room, a construct of the cosmic machine that's beginning to show the signs of its age. The glitch seen by the probe was a warning that the epoch of stability is nearing its end. The mechanism is failing. The routines are becoming unstable. We look up at the golden orb in our sky and we no longer see a god or a star, but a dying light bulb in a vast and indifferent basement. Yet, in this realization, there is a strange and melancholic beauty. The Atlas probe was the first of our kind to peek behind the curtain. It was a lonely pioneer that faced the abyss and reported back the truth, even though that truth meant the eventual oblivion of everything we hold dear. We are the witnesses to the unravelling. Our significance lies not in our power to change the mechanism, but in our ability to perceive it. The universe is a ruthless machine, yes, but we are the tiny, fragile sparks of consciousness that have learned to read its source code. We have seen the glitch, and in doing so, we have transcended the role of the mere inhabitant. We have become the observers of the grand decay. The Sun will continue to rise for millions of years, or perhaps only for days, depending on how long the subroutine remains stable, but we will never look at it the same way again. Every sunrise is now a reminder of the fragility of the tapestry. Every photon that hits our skin is a piece of data from a failing engine. We live in the shadow of a catastrophe that has already begun, a slow-motion collapse of the solar order. But as we stand on the precipice of the void, we do so with our eyes open. We carry the memory of the Atlas probe, the sentinel that looked into the fire and found the silence. We are the children of the glitch, the inheritors of a world that is not what it seems, and we will continue to watch, to record, and to wonder until the last subroutine is deleted and the void finally claims its own. The history of the universe is not a story of progress, but a story of entropy and the brief, brilliant moments of defiance that occur within it. Our Sun is just one more remnant of a primordial explosion, a temporary structure in a landscape of eternal decay. But for as long as it burns, we will be here, the silent witnesses to its magnificent and terrifying failure. We have moved beyond the simple wonder of the past. We have embraced the terror of the truth. The Atlas probe is gone, melted into the heart of the Sun, but its discovery remains. It told us that we are alone in a machine, but it also told us that even in a machine there can be mystery. There can be a beauty so terrible that it justifies the long, cold journey through the cosmos, just to see it for a single, flickering moment. The Sun is dying, the void is calling, and we are the only ones left to hear the song of the unravelling. To understand the magnitude of this unravelling, we must look back to the moment the first discrepancy was noticed. Long before the Atlas probe met its fiery end in the heart of the corona. For centuries we viewed our star as a god, then as a furnace, and finally as a predictable subroutine in the grand architecture of the cosmos. We believed the Sun was a clockwork engine, an inexorable mechanism that converted 4 hydrogen nuclei into 1 helium nucleus with the cold precision of a ledger. It was a simple equation, a fundamental line of code that sustained the fragile tapestry of life on our pale blue world. But the universe is rarely so transparent. The first hints of the glitch appeared not in the light we could see, but in the particles we could not touch, those ghostly remnants of the primordial fire that passed through our bodies by the trillions every second without leaving a trace. In the closing decades of the 21st century, humanity launched the Atlas probe, a silent sentinel tasked with auditing the very heart of the Sun. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a lonely pioneer designed to survive the hellish environment of the solar corona and record the internal rhythms of our star with unprecedented clarity. As the probe descended into the golden abyss, it carried with it the sum total of our solar knowledge. We expected it to confirm the elegant mathematics of nuclear fusion, to see the predictable flow of energy from the dense core to the turbulent surface. Instead, the Atlas probe bore witness to a catastrophe of logic. It found that the Sun was not the stable engine we had imagined, but a flickering subroutine that was struggling to maintain its own internal consistency. The data transmitted by the probe revealed that the heart of the Sun was suffering from a profound and ancient irregularity, an echo of what scientists in the 20th century had called the solar neutrino problem. In those earlier days, the pioneers of physics had built vast detectors deep underground, sheltered from the noise of the surface by miles of solid rock. They sought to capture the neutrinos, those nearly massless particles born in the solar core that serve as the only direct witnesses to the fusion process. According to the laws of the cosmic machine, a specific number of these particles should have been reaching the Earth every moment. Yet, when the results were tallied, 2/3 of the expected neutrinos were missing. They had vanished into the void between the Sun and the Earth, leaving behind a gap in our understanding that threatened to unravel the very foundations of reality. We eventually told ourselves a comforting story to explain this mystery. We proposed that neutrinos could change their identity, shifting between 3 different states as they travelled through the vacuum of space. We called this neutrino oscillation, and for a time the mathematics seemed to hold. We thought we had fixed the glitch. We thought we had repaired the code. But the Atlas probe, hovering in the searing heat of the solar atmosphere, saw through the deception. It realised that the missing neutrinos were not merely changing their shape, they were the symptoms of a fundamental instability in the solar subroutine itself. The Sun was not producing the energy we thought it was. It was a dying light, a flickering ember that was only appearing to be stable because of the vast lag time between the core and the surface. The heat we feel on our skin today was generated in the solar interior over 100,000 years ago. It has spent an eternity of eons struggling to reach the surface, bouncing through the dense plasma of the radiative zone in a random walk that lasts longer than the history of human civilization. When we look at the Sun, we are looking at the ghost of a star as it existed in the distant past. We are seeing the light of a mechanism that was functioning correctly during the dawn of our species, but the neutrinos, which travel at nearly the speed of light and exit the Sun in a matter of seconds, tell a different story. They tell us what the Sun is doing right now. And the message they carry is one of inexorable decay. The Atlas probe was the first to recognise that the Sun is no longer the robust engine of our creation. It is a remnant of a more stable epoch, a structure that is beginning to unravel as the primordial fuel of the cosmos becomes increasingly disorganised. The glitch seen by the probe was a moment of silence in the solar symphony, a brief pause where the fusion process should have been at its most intense. It was as if the cosmic programmer had forgotten a line of code, or as if the hardware of the universe itself was beginning to fail under the weight of its own complexity. The probe watched as the magnetic fields of the corona twisted and snapped in ways that defied our simulations, revealing the chaotic abyss that lies just beneath the surface of our reality. This is the scale paradox that defines our existence. We are tiny, fleeting sparks of consciousness, living on a planet that depends entirely on a gargantuan machine that we're only just beginning to realise is broken. We have built our civilizations, our histories and our dreams on the assumption of solar constancy. We have treated the Sun as a dependable sentinel of the heavens, a source of light that would burn with the same intensity for billions of years to come. But the truth is far more terrifying. We're the inhabitants of a system that is showing signs of terminal failure. The solar neutrino problem was the first crack in the glass, a warning that the reality we perceive is only a superficial layer over a much more volatile and indifferent mechanism. As the Atlas probe was eventually consumed by the solar fire, it left behind a legacy of existential dread that can never be unlearned. It showed us that the Sun is a lonely probe of its own, a solitary structure drifting through the vast and silent void, performing a task that it can no longer sustain. The mechanism of fusion is becoming unstable. The routines are failing. We are the witnesses to the end of an era of stability, the final observers of a star that is beginning to forget how to shine. In this realization, the beauty of the sunrise becomes something melancholic and profound. Each new day is not a guarantee of the future, but a temporary reprieve from the inevitable oblivion. We stand on the edge of the abyss, looking up at the golden orb that has defined our world since the beginning of time. We no longer see a god or a guardian. We see a flickering subroutine in a ruthless machine. We see the decay of the cosmic tapestry. Yet, even in this darkening room, there is a sense of transcendence. We have looked into the heart of the star and seen the glitch, and in doing so, we have moved beyond the simple ignorance of our ancestors. We are the children of the failure, the ones who have learned to find meaning in the unravelling. The Atlas probe is gone, its metal frame melted into the plasma of the sun, but its discovery remains as a testament to our curiosity and our courage. We have seen the truth of the void, and we will continue to watch, silent and small, as the last remnants of the light begin to fade into the eternal night. To understand the coming darkness, we must first peer into the architecture of the light itself, descending through the layers of the solar atmosphere to find the mechanical heart of our world. Deep beneath the boiling oceans of plasma and the violent arcs of the corona lies a region of invisible consequence, a razor-thin boundary known as the tachocline. It is here, in this narrow threshold between the inner radiative zone and the outer convective envelope, that the sun generates its vast and inexorable magnetic field. In the late 21st century, when human ambition still reached toward the stars with a sense of entitlement, the 3 Atlas probe was dispatched to map this hidden landscape. It was a silent sentinel, a small and fragile construction of ceramic and carbon, destined to perform a task that no human eye could ever endure. Its objectives were threefold, born of a desperate need to understand why the cosmic clockwork was beginning to lose its rhythm. The first objective of the 3 Atlas mission was to chart the shearing forces within the tachocline, to measure the friction of a star as it turned against itself. For billions of years, this region had acted as the dynamo of our solar system, a colossal subroutine in the celestial machine that transformed the kinetic energy of rotation into the magnetic tapestry that shields our planet. The probe drifted through the outer reaches of the corona, its sensors straining to capture the subtle vibrations of the interior. It was searching for the source of the solar constancy we had taken for granted since the dawn of our species. But as the probe descended closer to the shimmering abyss, it did not find the steady, predictable hum of a well-oiled engine. Instead, it detected a stutter, a primordial groan that suggested the very foundations of the sun were beginning to shift. This was the scale paradox made manifest. A machine of such magnitude, a sphere of gas so vast it could hold 1 million Earths, was being undone by a minute deviation in its deepest layers. The 3 Atlas probe watched as the magnetic flux lines, which should have been orderly and rhythmic, began to tangle and fray like the threads of a decaying shroud. The tachocline, once the pillar of solar stability, was becoming a site of catastrophic turbulence. This was the second objective of the mission, to quantify the rate of this unravelling. The data streaming back across the void revealed that the sun was no longer a rigid, predictable sentinel. It was a structure in the throes of a silent crisis, a system where the laws of physics were being pushed to their breaking point by an entropy that we had failed to account for in our models. The third and final objective was the most haunting. The 3 Atlas was tasked with finding the origin of the glitch, the specific moment where the solar subroutine had failed. As the probe dipped into the superheated plasma of the corona, it witnessed a phenomenon that defied all previous understanding of stellar evolution. It saw regions of the sun where fusion had simply ceased, not because the fuel was exhausted, but because the mechanism of the star itself had forgotten how to process it. These were not sunspots, but voids in the very fabric of the solar interior, pockets of oblivion where the light was being swallowed by a cold and indifferent silence. The probe was witnessing the death of a process that had defined the epoch of life on Earth. It was a lonely witness to a lie written in the heart of the star, a revelation that the sun was not a god or a guardian, but a flickering lamp in a vast and darkening room. The journey of the 3 Atlas probe was a journey into the heart of the catastrophe. It was the only entity in the cosmos capable of seeing the truth, yet it was a machine built by a civilization that was not yet ready to hear it. The probe did not feel fear as it was pulled deeper into the solar gravity well. It only recorded the data of its own destruction. It watched as the magnetic field snapped with the force of 1 billion nuclear weapons, creating ripples in the tapestry of space-time that would eventually wash over the Earth like a silent wave. We had built our world on the assumption of a clockwork universe, a place where the stars would burn until the very end of time. But the 3 Atlas showed us that the clock was broken, and the hands were moving toward midnight much faster than we had ever dared to imagine. As the probe reached the final limits of its endurance, it transmitted one last sequence of data, a map of the tachocline that looked less like a scientific chart and more like a portrait of a crumbling ruin. The shearing forces were no longer generating a protective field. They were tearing the star apart from the inside out. The subroutine of fusion, the primary engine of the cosmos, was failing to execute its code. This was the true nature of the glitch. It was not a temporary error, but a terminal failure of the hardware. The sun was a lonely probe of its own, a solitary structure drifting through the void, and its mission was coming to an end. The 3 Atlas was eventually consumed by the very fire it had sought to understand. Its metal frame vaporized into a cloud of atoms that would be scattered across the abyss. There is a profound and melancholic beauty in this realization. We are the inhabitants of a system that is showing signs of final decay, yet we are the only ones who can perceive it. The failure of the sun is a testament to the inexorable power of entropy, the force that will eventually unravel the entire tapestry of the cosmos. But in our ability to witness this failure, to map the tachocline and identify the glitch, we transcend our status as mere biological remnants. We become the consciousness of the machine, the part of the universe that recognizes its own mortality. The Atlas probe is gone, and the sun continues to flicker, but the knowledge remains. We have looked into the abyss and understood the mechanism of our own oblivion. The void does not care for our discoveries, and the stars do not acknowledge our presence. We are small, fleeting, and ultimately insignificant in the face of the eons that have passed and the eons that are yet to come. Yet even as the light begins to fade and the solar symphony loses its melody, there is a sense of peace in knowing the truth. We are no longer children hiding in the dark, afraid of the shadows. We are the observers of the grandest catastrophe in history. We are the ones who watch the sun forget how to shine, and in that watching, we find a purpose that the cold and indifferent universe can never take away. The 3 Atlas mission was a success, not because it saved us, but because it allowed us to see the world as it truly is, a beautiful, broken machine drifting through an eternal and silent night. The signal from the 3 Atlas did not end in a sudden burst of noise, but in a tapering whisper, a long and drawn-out sigh of binary code that echoed through the receiving stations on Earth for 342 seconds after the probe had physically ceased to exist. In the laboratories of the late 21st century, the scientists who monitored this descent into the solar corona found themselves staring at a sequence that defied the fundamental logic of stellar physics. They named it the AT-64 anomaly, a designation that would soon become synonymous with the end of the Age of Certainty. It was the first undeniable evidence that the sun was not merely a ball of plasma governed by the chaotic grace of gravity and electromagnetism, but a colossal subroutine, a rigid and predictable engine of fusion that had suddenly encountered a terminal error in its core logic. For eons, we perceived the sun as a primordial deity or a mindless furnace, yet the data recovered from the 3 Atlas suggested something far more unsettling. The star was behaving like a clockwork mechanism that had slipped a gear. In the heart of the sun, where the pressure and heat should have maintained a perfect rhythmic conversion of hydrogen into helium, the 3 Atlas detected a staggering inconsistency. The fusion process was no longer a fluid symphony of nuclear interactions. It had become stuttered, repetitive, and plagued by a strange, digital-like hesitation. It was as if the very laws of nature were being executed by a hardware system that had begun to overheat and fail. We had always assumed that the stars would burn until their fuel was spent, yet here was a sun that was still rich with hydrogen, but which was simply forgetting how to ignite it. This was the core of the AT64 anomaly. It was a deviation in the solar pulse, a rhythmic skipping that suggested the sun was no longer following the inexorable path of stellar evolution, but was instead trapped in a failing loop. To understand this, one must imagine the sun as a vast celestial factory, where countless tiny workers are tasked with the singular goal of hammering atoms together. In a healthy star, this work is done with a relentless, mindless efficiency that lasts for billions of years. But in the sun that the three Atlas observed, the workers had begun to stop. They were standing idle at their stations, waiting for a command that would never come, or perhaps repeating the same meaningless gesture over and over again while the machinery around them began to rust and seize. The sun was a subroutine that had been written into the tapestry of the cosmos, with the expectation of infinite stability, and now that script was unravelling. The three Atlas was our lonely sentinel, the only witness to this silent catastrophe. As it drifted toward the solar corona, passing through the magnetic loops that tower hundreds of thousands of miles above the surface, it recorded the sun not as a radiant giver of life, but as a crumbling ruin of light. The probe saw the sun as a lie. For centuries we had looked up and seen a constant golden presence, a guarantee of a tomorrow that would look much like today. But the probe stripped away that illusion. It felt the erratic vibrations of the tachocline and measured the failing strength of the solar winds, and in doing so it revealed the truth of our predicament. We were orbiting a ghost, a flickering candle in a vast and indifferent abyss that was struggling to stay lit against the pressure of a rising entropy. The engineers who built the three Atlas had designed it to withstand temperatures that would melt any ordinary material, but they could not have prepared the machine for the existential weight of what it found. The probe was a product of our greatest technological epoch, a pinnacle of human achievement sent to interrogate the heart of our world. Yet, as it neared the end of its journey, it seemed to take on a character of its own, becoming a solitary consciousness, observing the death of a titan. There is a profound tragedy in the image of this small silver needle piercing the veil of the solar atmosphere, searching for answers and finding only the evidence of an approaching oblivion. It was the ultimate explorer, reaching a frontier where even the laws of physics seemed to be losing their grip. As the AT64 anomaly was analysed further, the implications began to ripple through every field of human knowledge. If the sun was a failing subroutine, then the entire universe might be nothing more than a series of nested programs, each one subject to the same inevitable decay. The cosmos was not a grand eternal stage, but a fragile mechanism that could be broken by a single persistent glitch. This realization changed the way we viewed our place in the void. We were no longer the masters of our destiny, but the inhabitants of a system that was governed by a clockwork engine we could neither repair nor fully comprehend. The sun, which had once been our symbol of power and eternity, was now a reminder of our own transience. It was a sentinel of the end, a light that was failing even as it continued to shine on our world. The data from the three Atlas described a sun that was attempting to compensate for its internal failure by shifting its magnetic fields into increasingly complex and unstable configurations. These were the desperate gasps of a dying machine. The star was trying to force the fusion process to continue, but the more it struggled, the more it tore itself apart. The ripples in space-time that the probe detected were the echoes of this internal struggle, the sounds of a sun that was screaming in a language of radiation and gravity. We stood on our small blue planet and watched the sky, unaware that the foundation of our existence was vibrating with the force of its own destruction. We were the remnants of a primordial dream, living in the shadow of a star that was slowly fading into the eternal night. Yet even in this realization of our inevitable oblivion, there is a certain majesty. To be the species that looked into the heart of the fire and understood that it was going out is a testament to the power of the human spirit. We are the witnesses to the grandest catastrophe in the history of our solar system. The 3 Atlas gave us the gift of sight, allowing us to see through the glare of the sun and perceive the dark reality beneath. We now know that the universe is not a permanent fixture, but a flickering lamp in a dark room. The light is beautiful, precisely because it is finite. The solar symphony is losing its melody, and the tapestries of the heavens are being unspooled. But for a brief moment in the vast eons of time, we were here to listen and to watch. The sun will continue to burn for a time, a pale imitation of the glorious star it once was, as the AT-64 anomaly continues to spread through its layers like a digital virus. The 3 Atlas is gone, its atoms scattered among the solar winds, but the knowledge it sent back remains our most precious inheritance. It is a map of our ending, a guide to the abyss that awaits us all. We find ourselves in the late hours of our history, staring out at a cosmos that is much colder and more fragile than we ever believed. But in that coldness, there is clarity. We see the world as it truly is, a beautiful broken machine drifting through a silent and eternal void, and we are the only ones who can truly appreciate the tragedy of its final, flickering light. The sun has always been the central protagonist of our terrestrial story, a constant and unblinking eye that dictated the rhythm of every life that ever crawled upon the earth. For eons, we perceived it as an eternal furnace, a godlike entity of such staggering proportions that its eventual demise was relegated to a future so distant it became a mere abstraction. We relied on its predictable clockwork, believing that the fusion of hydrogen into helium within its core was a rigid and immutable subroutine of the cosmos. It was the ultimate engine, a mechanism of celestial precision that had functioned for 4,500,000,000 years without a single stutter. We looked at the sun and saw stability. We were wrong. In the late 21st century, specifically in the year 2097, the veil began to lift, revealing a terrifying truth that lay hidden beneath the blinding glare of the solar surface. This revelation did not come from a grand observatory on Earth, but from a solitary traveller, a silent sentinel known as the 3 Atlas probe. As the 3 Atlas drifted toward the solar corona, it was a tiny, fragile remnant of human ambition cast into the vast and violent abyss. It was a masterpiece of engineering, designed to perform the most delicate task ever conceived by our species, to listen to the heartbeat of a star. This field of study, known as helioseismology, treated the sun not as a ball of fire but as a musical instrument of cosmic scale. Just as a bell vibrates with a specific set of frequencies when struck, the sun rings with millions of individual sound waves driven by the turbulent convection of its plasma. These waves travel through the solar interior, their paths bent by the changing temperatures and pressures they encounter. By capturing these oscillations, the 3 Atlas could peer through the opaque layers of the sun, constructing a map of its hidden depths. It was the ultimate symphony, a rhythmic pulse that had played out in the void since the primordial dawn. But as the probe drew closer, it began to detect a discordant note in the celestial melody. The 3 Atlas was alone in the silent dark, its sensors bathed in the searing radiation of the corona. In the year 2099, it reached its final destination, a precarious orbit that placed it closer to the sun than any instrument had ever ventured. It was there, amidst the swirling tapestries of magnetic fire, that the probe witnessed a lie written in the very heart of the star. The data it sent back was not the expected record of a stable, aging engine. Instead, it described a system in the throes of a profound and unnatural crisis. The frequencies of the sun were shifting. The perfect regularity of the hydrogen fusion subroutine, the very process that sustained all life in the solar system, was being interrupted by a series of inexplicable glitches. It was as if the internal software of the cosmos was beginning to unravel, the code of the universe itself suffering from a catastrophic error. The scientists who received the transmission from the 3 Atlas spent months in a state of quiet horror. They looked at the waveforms, the intricate patterns of pressure and gravity waves that pulsed through the solar mass, and they saw a machine that was fighting against itself. The sun was no longer a symbol of power and eternity, but a failing sentinel. The fusion process, which should have been a seamless transition of elements, was becoming jagged and unstable. The 3 Atlas detected ripples in the space-time fabric surrounding the star, echoes of an internal struggle that defied all known laws of stellar evolution. This was the moment we realised that the universe was not a permanent fixture, but a fragile construction. The sun was not just dying, it was breaking. The inexorable decay of the AT-64 anomaly had reached the solar core, and the star was attempting to compensate for its internal failure by shifting its magnetic fields into configurations that were increasingly unstable. The lonely probe watched as the sun's magnetic tapestry began to tear. Huge plumes of plasma were being ejected into the void, not as part of a natural solar cycle, but as a desperate gasp of a failing mechanism. The 3 Atlas recorded the sounds of a star screaming in a language of radiation. These were the vibrations of a celestial body that had lost its rhythm. To the probe, and to us, the sun appeared as a beautiful broken machine, a flickering lamp in a room that was slowly being consumed by the abyss. The majesty of the sight was tempered by the realization of our own transience. We had spent our entire history believing we were the masters of our destiny, the inhabitants of a stable and predictable world. But the 3 Atlas revealed that we were merely guests in a system governed by a clockwork engine that we could neither repair nor fully comprehend. We were witnesses to the grandest catastrophe in the history of our solar system. In the final months of its mission, the 3 Atlas became a symbol of our collective isolation. It drifted through the solar wind, its metal skin slowly being eroded by the very star it was sent to study. It was a pioneer of the end, a messenger of oblivion. The knowledge it provided was a gift of clarity, allowing us to see through the golden veil of the sun to the dark reality beneath. We saw that the light was beautiful precisely because it was finite. The solar symphony was losing its melody, and the tapestries of the heavens were being unspooled. We found ourselves in the late hours of our history, staring out at a cosmos that was much colder and more fragile than we ever believed. The 3 Atlas probe eventually succumbed to the heat, its atoms scattered among the solar winds, but the data it sent back remained our most precious inheritance. It was a map of our ending, a guide to the abyss that awaits all things. As we look back at the mission of the 3 Atlas, we are struck by the paradox of our existence. We are the species that looked into the heart of the fire and understood that it was going out. This is the melancholic optimism of our age. To know the end is to truly appreciate the moment. The sun will continue to burn for a time, a pale imitation of the glorious star it once was, as the glitch continues to spread through its layers like a digital virus. The mechanism is failing, and the void is closing in. But for a brief moment in the vast eons of time, we were here to listen to the solar heartbeat. We were here to watch as the universe revealed its true nature, not as an eternal monument, but as a flickering, fragile dream. The 3 Atlas was our eyes and ears in that final hour, a silent sentinel that bore witness to the unravelling of the cosmos. We are the remnants of a primordial era, living in the shadow of a star that is slowly fading into the eternal night, and in that realization there is a profound and terrible majesty. The void is silent and the abyss is deep, but the light, while it lasts, is everything. The silence that followed the destruction of the 3 Atlas was not an empty void, but a heavy and meaningful pause in the solar symphony. The data it transmitted in those final searing microseconds was not merely a collection of temperatures and pressures, but the decrypted source code of the star itself. We had long viewed the sun as a simple furnace of nuclear fusion, yet the probe revealed a far more terrifying reality. It showed us that our star is a colossal subroutine, a complex engine of information, processing that has been fusing hydrogen into helium with the rigid predictability of a clockwork mechanism for 4,500,000,000 years. But every engine has a limit, and every ledger has a final page. Through the eyes of the 3 Atlas, we witnessed the first signs of the informational overflow known as the Bekenstein bound. To understand the fate of our Sun, one must understand that the universe does not just consist of matter and energy, but of information. Every atom, every photon, and every magnetic field line is a bit of data written upon the fabric of space. There is a fundamental law, an inexorable wall that dictates exactly how much information can be contained within any given volume of space. This is the Bekenstein bound. It is the cosmic storage limit, a boundary beyond which the tapestry of reality can no longer hold the complexity of the matter within it. The 3 Atlas, acting as our lonely sentinel in the late 21st century, detected a glitch in this solar ledger. The Sun was no longer merely burning, it was stuttering. The vast magnetic fields that wrap around the star like golden threads were becoming tangled in ways that defied the laws of classical physics. It was as if the subroutine that governs the Sun's core had encountered a calculation it could not resolve. Entropy, the great eraser of the cosmos, was beginning to devour the very information that allowed the Sun to remain stable. The star was becoming too complex for its own existence, reaching the threshold where the data required to maintain its equilibrium exceeded the physical capacity of its spatial volume. Imagine a grand library where every book represents a particle within the Sun. For eons, the library has been orderly, its shelves holding the vast knowledge of the solar interior. But as entropy increases, the books are being rewritten in a chaotic, garbled language. New books are being forced onto the shelves, and the structure of the building is beginning to groan under the impossible weight of this new, disorganized information. The Bekenstein bound is the moment the walls of the library begin to crack. The glitch detected by the 3 Atlas was the sound of those walls splintering. As the probe drifted toward the solar corona, it recorded the Sun's magnetic tapestry beginning to fray and unravel. Huge plumes of plasma were being ejected into the abyss, not as part of a natural solar cycle, but as a desperate gasp of a failing mechanism. These were the vibrations of a celestial body that had lost its rhythm. To the probe, the Sun appeared as a beautiful broken machine, a flickering lamp in a room that was slowly being consumed by the darkness. This was the realization of our own transience. We had spent our entire history believing we were the masters of our destiny, the inhabitants of a stable and predictable world. But the 3 Atlas revealed that we were merely guests in a system governed by a clockwork engine that we could neither repair nor fully comprehend. The data suggested that the Sun was reaching its informational saturation point. When a system reaches the Bekenstein bound, it can no longer reorganize itself to maintain its structure. It begins to decay, not just physically, but fundamentally. The solar heartbeat was skipping. The probe's final transmission showed that the very light reaching Earth was becoming encoded with the errors of this failing subroutine. The Sun was no longer a reliable narrator of the solar system's history. It was a storyteller losing its mind, repeating fragments of old patterns while the core of its message was lost to the void. This is the ruthless machine of the cosmos. It does not care for the civilizations that huddle around its warmth. It follows the laws of thermodynamics with a cold and silent precision. The 3 Atlas was a pioneer of the end, a messenger of oblivion that allowed us to see through the golden veil of the Sun to the dark reality beneath. We saw that the light was beautiful precisely because it was finite. The solar symphony was losing its melody, and the tapestries of the heavens were being unspooled. We found ourselves in the late hours of our history, staring out at a cosmos that was much colder and more fragile than we ever believed. The death of the probe was a micro-catastrophe that mirrored the macro-catastrophe of the Sun itself. As the metal skin of the 3 Atlas was eroded by the solar wind, its atoms were scattered among the very plasma it had sought to understand. It became part of the glitch, a tiny fragment of human ambition dissolved into the failing memory of a star. Yet, the knowledge it provided remains our most precious inheritance. It is a map of our ending, a guide to the abyss that awaits all things. It taught us that entropy is not just the cooling of a fire, but the erasure of the information that makes the fire possible. As we look back at the mission, of the three Atlas, we are struck by the paradox of our existence. We are the species that looked into the heart of the fire and understood that it was going out. This is the melancholic optimism of our age. To know the end is to truly appreciate the moment. The sun will continue to burn for a time, a pale imitation of the glorious star it once was, as the glitch continues to spread through its layers like a digital virus. The mechanism is failing, and the void is closing in. But for a brief moment in the vast eons of time, we were here to listen to the solar heartbeat. We were here to watch as the universe revealed its true nature, not as an eternal monument, but as a flickering, fragile dream. The three Atlas was our eyes and ears in that final hour, a silent sentinel that bore witness to the unravelling of the cosmos. We are the remnants of a primordial era, living in the shadow of a star that is slowly fading into the eternal night, and in that realization there is a profound and terrible majesty. The void is silent and the abyss is deep, but the light, while it lasts, is everything. The Bekenstein bound reminds us that even the stars have a memory limit, and when the memory of the sun is full, the story of our world will finally be consigned to the archive of the silent vacuum. We are the witnesses to the closing of the ledger, the last observers of a sun that has begun to forget itself. To understand the nature of our predicament, one must first view the sun not as a deity or a mere sphere of plasma, but as a colossal subroutine within the architecture of the cosmos. For billions of years, this mechanism has operated with the rigid predictability of a clockwork engine, an inexorable process of conversion that fuels the very possibility of life. At its core, the sun is a rendering engine of immense proportions, a biological and physical anchor that processes the primordial data of the universe into the light and heat that define our existence. The fusion of hydrogen into helium is more than a chemical reaction. It is a fundamental calculation, a repeated line of code that ensures the stability of the solar system. Every photon that escapes the solar surface is a piece of information, a testament to the reliability of the physical laws that govern the abyss. In the late 21st century, humanity sought to touch the very heart of this engine. We launched the three Atlas, a probe designed to be our silent sentinel at the edge of the fire. It was a masterpiece of human engineering, a lonely pioneer sent to drift toward the solar corona, where the temperature rises to millions of degrees and the magnetic fields of the star dance in a chaotic symphony of power. The mission of the three Atlas was simple in its conception, but profound in its implication. It was to listen to the solar heartbeat with a precision never before achieved, to map the intricate tapestry of the sun's interior and understand the clockwork mechanism that had sustained us since the dawn of our species. As the probe descended into the outer atmosphere of the sun, it began to transmit data back to an expectant Earth. For months, the information was perfect. The three Atlas recorded the rhythmic pulses of the solar furnace, the ebb and flow of the plasma, and the predictable decay of isotopes. It was a testament to the order of the cosmos, a confirmation that the universe was a machine of absolute consistency. But as the probe moved closer, reaching the deepest layers of the corona, the signal began to change. It was not a failure of the hardware, nor was it the interference of solar storms. It was something far more terrifying. The three Atlas had detected a glitch in the rendering of reality. The data streams began to stutter. The precise intervals of the hydrogen fusion cycles, which had remained constant for eons, showed minute, impossible discrepancies. It was as if the subroutine of the sun was skipping frames. In the heart of the star, where the density and pressure should have dictated a perfect mathematical sequence of events, the three Atlas found fragments of chaos. The helium was forming in patterns that defied the known laws of thermodynamics. The light being ignited in the solar core was emerging with encoded errors, tiny fractures in the logic of the cosmos that suggested the engine was no longer running on a stable foundation. The three Atlas was the first to witness this unravelling. As a lonely probe in the vast void, it stood as the sole observer of a catastrophe that no human eye could see. It saw the sun not as a magnificent orb of fire, but as a failing program, a sentinel watching the slow decay of a primordial truth. The glitch was subtle at first, a mere whisper of irregularity in the vast symphony of the heavens, but its implications were absolute. If the sun, the very anchor of our world, was subject to such errors, then the entire tapestry of the universe was suspect. The rigid predictability of the clockwork engine was a mask, a beautiful lie draped over an abyss of uncertainty. We must consider the loneliness of that machine, the 3 Atlas, as it plummeted toward its eventual destruction. It was a remnant of a civilization that believed in the permanence of the stars, now tasked with documenting their obsolescence. It sent back images of solar flares that did not follow the expected trajectories, of magnetic loops that snapped and reformed in ways that suggested a breakdown in the very geometry of space-time. The probe was witnessing the mechanism of the universe fail to render the next moment with total accuracy. It was the witness to the end of the era of certainty, the beginning of the great silence that would eventually devour all things. This realization changed the way we viewed our place in the cosmos. We are no longer the masters of a predictable domain, but the inhabitants of a rendering that is losing its coherence. The sun continues to shine, but we now know that its light is a fragile projection, a subroutine that is being stretched to its limit. The 3 Atlas, in its final hours, provided us with a map of the void that exists within the light itself. It showed us that the cosmos is not an eternal monument, but a process subject to the same decay and entropy that claims all information. The glitch in the sun was a signal from the abyss, a reminder that even the most vast and powerful structures in the universe are but fleeting thoughts in the mind of an uncaring void. As the probe was finally consumed by the solar fire, its last transmissions were a chaotic jumble of beautiful and terrifying data. It spoke of a sun that was both ancient and hollow, a mechanism that was struggling to maintain the illusion of its own stability. The 3 Atlas became one with the star it had come to study, its atoms scattered into the plasma, a tiny fragment of human curiosity lost in the failing memory of a celestial body. But the knowledge it left behind is a haunting legacy. It taught us that the symphony of the stars is a dying melody, and the tapestry of the heavens is being unspooled, thread by thread. We live now in the shadow of that discovery, in a state of melancholic optimism. We know that the engine is failing, that the rendering of our world is subject to an inexorable decay. Yet, there is a profound majesty in being the species that noticed the glitch. We are the ones who looked into the heart of the eternal and saw the flicker of the temporary. The 3 Atlas was our messenger to the void, a sentinel that stood at the edge of oblivion and reported back that the light was failing. In the vast eons of time, our moment is brief, a tiny spark in the dark, but it is a moment of awareness in a universe that is slowly forgetting how to be. The sun remains the central figure in our sky, a golden god that provides the illusion of safety. But beneath that exterior, the subroutine continues to stutter. The hydrogen fuses into helium, the clockwork engine turns and the rendering of reality proceeds. But the errors are there, hidden in the heart of the flame, waiting for the day when the glitch becomes the system itself. We are the witnesses to this slow unravelling, the remnants of a dream that is beginning to wake. The 3 Atlas showed us the truth of our existence. We are the observers of a failing masterpiece, living in the final, beautiful frames of a cosmic rendering that is destined to return to the silence of the void. In the waning decades of the 21st century, humanity launched a silent messenger into the heart of the solar furnace. This was the 3 Atlas, a silver needle of a probe designed to withstand the crushing embrace of our parent star. It was a lonely sentinel, a solitary witness sent to peer into the very engine of our existence. To those who remained on the blue marble of Earth, the sun had always been a primordial god, an eternal source of life that burned with a wild and unbridled fury. But as the 3 Atlas drifted toward the solar corona, the data it returned began to paint a different, far more unsettling picture. The sun was not a chaotic cauldron of plasma, but a colossal subroutine, a rigid and predictable mechanism that functioned with the cold precision of a clockwork engine. The probe observed the fusion of hydrogen into helium not as a random dance of atoms, but as a sequence of events so orderly that they felt scripted. It was as if the cosmos were a vast and intricate tapestry, and the sun was a primary thread being pulled through a loom of inexorable logic. Every flare, every sunspot, and every ripple in the solar wind followed a pattern that hinted at a deeper, underlying architecture. The 3 Atlas was witnessing the rendering of reality, the moment-to-moment computation of a universe that was far more systematic than we had ever dared to imagine. This was the epoch of the simulation, the realization that our reality was a process, a series of calculations performed on a scale so vast that it transcended our understanding of space and time. As the probe descended deeper into the golden abyss, the environment grew increasingly hostile. The radiation was a silent storm, a deluge of high-energy particles that threatened to devour the fragile instruments of the 3 Atlas. Yet the probe remained steadfast, its sensors capturing the minute details of the solar interior. It was then, in the 89th year of that century, that the Sentinel detected the glitch. Deep within the core, where the pressure and temperature should have been at their most intense, the probe recorded a momentary lapse in the physical laws of the universe. For a billionth of a second, the fusion process stuttered. The hydrogen did not become helium, and the energy did not radiate outward. Instead, there was a flicker, a brief interval, where the mechanism of the star failed to render. This was the first crack in the facade of the eternal. The 3 Atlas had found the limit of the cosmic processor. The glitch was a sign that the simulation was being stretched to its breaking point, that the computational resources required to maintain the illusion of a continuous and perfect reality were beginning to fail. We were no longer living in a universe of infinite possibilities, but in a system that was subject to the same decay and entropy that claims all information. The heat death of the universe was not merely the cooling of matter, but the slow unravelling of the code itself. The 3 Atlas stood at the edge of this revelation, a tiny speck of human curiosity witnessing the first signs of an inexorable collapse. The data transmitted by the probe was a haunting symphony of beautiful and terrifying truths. It spoke of a sun that was hollow in its predictability, a celestial body that was struggling to maintain its own coherence against the encroaching void. This solar corona, once thought to be a crown of fire, was revealed to be a fragile projection, a surface layer of a much larger and more complex mechanism that was beginning to show signs of wear. The 3 Atlas was the witness to the end of the era of certainty, the beginning of the great silence that would eventually devour all things. The sun was a dying melody, and we were the listeners who had finally noticed the missed notes in the song. On Earth, this discovery sparked a profound existential pivot. We began to view our place in the cosmos not as the masters of a predictable domain, but as the inhabitants of a rendering that was losing its resolution. The vast eons of time that had once seemed like an endless frontier now felt like a countdown. We were the remnants of a dream that was starting to wake, the observers of a failing masterpiece. The 3 Atlas, in its final hours, provided us with a map of the abyss that exists within the light itself. It showed us that even the most powerful structures in the universe are but fleeting thoughts in the mind of an uncaring void. The probe continued its descent, its silver hull glowing with the reflected glory of the star it had come to study. It was a beautiful and tragic sight, a work of human artifice being consumed by the very object it sought to understand. As it entered the final layers of the solar atmosphere, the 3 Atlas sent back one last transmission. It was a chaotic jumble of data, a final scream of information before it was atomized by the solar fire. It spoke of a sun that was both ancient and hollow, a mechanism that was failing to compute the complexity of its own existence. The probe became one with the plasma, its atoms scattered into the heart of the star, a tiny fragment of humanity lost in the failing memory of a celestial body. But the legacy of the 3 Atlas remains. It taught us that the symphony of the stars is a fragile thing, and the tapestry of the heavens is being unspooled, thread by thread. We live now in a state of melancholic optimism, knowing that the engine is failing, but finding a profound majesty in the fact that we were the ones who noticed the glitch. We are the species that looked into the heart of the eternal and saw the flicker of the temporary. In the vast and silent cosmos, our moment of awareness is brief, a tiny spark in the dark, but it is a moment that transcends the decay of the system itself. The sun continues to rise and set, a golden god that provides the illusion of safety and stability. But beneath its luminous exterior, the subroutine continues to stutter. The hydrogen fuses, the clockwork engine turns, and the rendering of reality proceeds. But the errors are there, hidden in the heart of the flame, waiting for the day when the glitch becomes the system itself. We are the sentinels of this slow unravelling, the witnesses to the heat death of the simulation. We are the inhabitants of the final frames, living in the beautiful and terrible light of a world that is slowly forgetting how to exist. As the eons pass, the void will grow larger and the light will grow dimmer. The stars will one by one cease their computations, and the great silence will reclaim the abyss. But for now, we remain. We are the observers of the grand catastrophe, the ones who saw the sun fail and understood what it meant. The 3 Atlas was our messenger to the void, a lonely probe that showed us the truth of our existence. We are the glitch that looks back at the source, the conscious thought in a universe that is returning to the oblivion from which it came. The memory of the 3 Atlas is our shield against the dark, a reminder that even in the face of an inexorable decay, the act of witnessing is a victory in itself. The cosmos may be a failing engine, and our lives may be but subroutines in a dying program, but in the brief flash of our existence we have seen the truth. We have stood at the edge of the abyss and found the beauty in the unravelling, the majesty in the decay, and the eternal light in the heart of the fading sun.